Well, hello there, beautiful people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities and sentient beings right across this wide cosmos. I've just come in from the garden, so I'm completely exhausted and over-functioning. But it's cool in here with the birdie boys. I've just brought them inside. They've been out all day. Well, not all day. They went out rather late, actually. Why do I say all day? Almost of the day. They were out from, I think I put them outside around about 11 a.m. The time is currently 4:10 p.m. So half a day, but 5 hours. And it was hot out there, so occasionally I had the hose going to try and keep my trees and plants alive. So occasionally I'd spritz them, which is actually, you spritz birds, it's a form of punishment, but I think they understood that I wasn't punishing them, but trying to cool them down a little bit. They've got bath water, like 2 big bowls of water to bathe in, but they won't use it. They're a bit nuts. So they got spritzed on 2 separate occasions, and each time they kind of looked at me and went, actually that feels quite nice considering it's 27 degrees outside today. The high was 30 degrees. Anyway, it's currently 27. It's cooled down a little bit, and I'm cooling down a little bit. I cleaned both their cages this morning, and I just got a message. My lawn mowing is happening tomorrow. Okay, good. Just yeah, pleased about that. Where was I? Oh yes, confused by technology. So yes, I cleaned both their cages this morning, and while I do that, I listen to various podcasts on YouTube, and some of them were, dark subject matter, so a bit depressing. But anyway, I just scrubbed the cages and changed the papers, and what I do is I spritz it now with vinegar afterwards to neutralise the soap on the inside the cage, as best as I can, because I worry about them getting toxified. And to be fair, I clean their cages weekly, but more often than I used to do Charlie's, but Charlie's cage didn't get quite so dirty because she was free ranging in the garden with me most of the time, up and down the trees and shitting wherever she felt like, and it didn't accumulate too much unless I got really lazy or wasn't well and would forget sometimes. But anyway, their cages get cleaned weekly without any excuses. Even when I'm not feeling all that well, I discipline myself to do it because I don't want to have any more deaths in the family. No more deaths in the family, birdie boys. Little Bose, just before I turned the camera on, and he was preening happily. He's a much happier bird these days. He's got used to the fact that he's got a way too big cage, from the sublime to the ridiculous. His other cages were way too small, and now his cage is way too big. But when they're when I have them free ranging like they do in the room together, Kermie goes in his cage with him, and they keep each other company, and it's actually quite sweet. Although you saw in this morning's video that they decided to have a bit of a birdie num blue. Got a bit ugly, but it is what it is. Or we're wobbling everywhere. Wobbling people of Earth. Anyway, I've had a bit of a paranormal manifestation. Speaking of wobbling, I checked the Queensland Government earthquake site to see if there was an earth tremor last night, because I went to bed around about 11, and I wasn't asleep, and my bed shook. It shook as if someone was shaking it, and I just ignored it because I've been getting a fair bit of paranormal activity in recent months, really the whole time I've lived in this house, but it kind of has escalated a bit, and it's centred around my bedroom, which of course I'm not all that fucking delighted about. especially that entity that was climbing into bed with me, trying to trying to lie beside me. So I don't know if it was that same entity or something else, but it's happened a few times during this week of insomnia that I've had trouble sleeping. That's not the reason. Like, it doesn't scare me, it's just odd. But it happened again last night, and I had my CPAP mask on, and I was actually lying there wide awake but trying to drift off to sleep. And yeah, felt the bed shake, and either the stumps under my house are finally crumbling and the house is going to fall down with me in it, or I thought it's an earth tremor. But yeah, I just checked this afternoon and there were no earthquakes. There's been no earthquakes since that Kilkivan one that had us all shaking in August. So, bit odd. It's a bit odd. Like, it's not cool to shake my bed with me in it. There's possibly another rational explanation for it, like maybe the house is literally tilting, but then why at that particular moment in time when I'm trying to lie down and sink into sleep and join the astral? Am I right? It's a bit odd. Anyway, so this was I went to bed at 11, so it would have been around about 20 minutes of lying there, sort of dozing, trying to fall asleep, but conscious that my body was wanting to sleep, but my brain was bing, bing, bam, boom, baby, wired for sound. Could have taken over the world last night, and the night before that, and the night before that, and the night before that, and wow. Consider yourselves taken over. New world leadership. I used to blame it on my pets, and now I can't obfuscate that role anymore. I have to own it. But anyway, I'm joking about that before that. But the last new, she was about the fifth in succession. World leader was Charlie, and Charlie is with all the birdies in the heavens above now, and all the other pets. So these boys have not taken on the new world leadership in sacred space, which, to be fair, is a bit unusual. There's usually one that starts acting like he owns the whole place and bosses everyone around. And it used to be, when Beauregard and Charlie was alive, it was Charlie that ruled the roost. Even used to beat up the dog on regular occasions. So, yes, it's yet to be seen who steps into that role. I'm suspicious that the next new world leader of Sacred Space Titania's run might end up being little Bo. He's got the personality for it. He really has. He's feisty. But anyway, today's going to be a very long video, as I told you yesterday, because I saw how long the chapter is. And I'm very tired, so if I fade, I may have to break it up into 2 parts or 3 parts, because, yes, as I was saying, I cleaned the bird cages, and then I went out and I cut little mesh rounds for the bottom of pots. The turkeys have kept all the soil out, so I rescued what's left of the potting mix and put it into one pot that's still struggling to survive, and cut little rounds of this, I don't know what it was originally for, some sort of canvas. Cut it up and put it in the bottom of the remaining pots and put, broken pottery and tiles and that in preparation. I guess I'm going to be buying some potting mix and filling them up again if I'm putting in that effort. Needs to be done. It's all laid around. Kind of left it since the cyclone in March. Just couldn't be bothered. Was it March when we had the cyclone? Yes, it was. I think it was March. Or was it May? Don't remember now. It's already out of my mind. Well, anyway, I've got to sort my garden, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, and so I did that, and then I cleaned the filter in the fish pond, which is a filter that I use aquaponics, like lava, big chunky lava stones. So then that has to be rinsed out in the pond water, and then that mucky water gets poured as fertiliser on my pots out the front, which is also a fair bit of lugging things around and hefty work. By then I was already feeling a bit knackered, quite frankly, because it was hot out there, and worried about sunburn too. And then what was the next thing I did? Oh, and then I went and cut back some more of the dragon fruit, filled up that garden bin because I've only got one, and so I can only do it once a fortnight when they take that bin, which is annoying. I should ask the neighbours if they're using their green bins, if I can put my stuff in theirs and use theirs, but then I guess that would involve kind of communicating and intimacy and asking for favours, and I don't want to be dependent on anyone, so fuck it, I'll just do the dragon fruit slowly every fortnight. But it's that was hard yakka, cutting that down, and after I finished filling up the bin, I looked at the dragon fruit, and it doesn't even look like I've done anything. It's not even touching the sides, it's grown so massive. So there is that. Oh, look at it now, 4:20 p.m. again, and it's now 28 degrees Celsius. Can't be right, it's gone up a degree. Oh, probably because we're inside. So then in the midst of all that, I did some dishes, and I made some lunch in my air fryer, and sat out and ate lunch, listened to another podcast. And things are happening at Sacred Space, but I'm absolutely, my eyes are held together by sticks. But I think I'll read to you chapter 21, which I will read until I start slurring my words. And it's not that long. It was a great big long one. I'll read until I slur my words and stumble and fall and collapse, or start randomly channeling spirits which jump in when I'm exhausted too. I've noticed in my YouTube videos. So if you ever see me just start raving and talking to things you can't see, it's not schizophrenia. It's kind of a vulnerability of my spiritual boundaries, and my spirit people jump in. And sometimes they jump in for other reasons that they deem to be important in that time frame. And so I don't argue with it. I just, decide if it sounds too crazy before I read it out loud to you, people of Earth. But there's been a few that I was like, well, that's going to make me look like I'm right off my trolley. There was a delightful video last year when I had a spirit being very romantic and speaking to me in Italian, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not actually having any kind of intimacies with Italian men right now. What's going on? But anyway, they kept calling me. What did they keep calling me? I just laughed through the whole video because I thought it was delightful and comical. Oh, that's right, Cara Mia, like from the Addams Family. I'm sure it was somebody with a twisted sense of humour trying to trick me, but anyway, it was cute and it was hilarious. But I thought anyone watching that will be like, what is wrong with this woman? I'm perfectly fine, darlings. 30 years of therapy. I'm perfectly fine. Do I look fine to you? No. Well, I'm maybe not perfectly fine. Let's get it right. I'm imperfectly fine. Perfectly and imperfectly aligned with the cosmos, who likes to stir me up occasionally. Anyway, on that note, chapter 21, Rhiann, daughter of Belagund, was the... Yes, the birdies are calling to you, Cami. Rhiann, daughter of Belagund, was the wife of Huor, son of Galdor, and she was wedded to him 2 months before he went with Hurin, his brother, to the Neneath Anidiad. Are you fighting? You have to get out of his cage if you're going to fight. Just whiny sometimes. When no tidings came of her lord, she fled into the wild. But she was aided by the grey elves of Mithrim, and when her son Tuor was born, they fostered him. Oh, that was kind, wasn't it? Then Rian departed from Hithlam, and going to the house in Dengan, she laid herself down upon it and died. Morwen, daughter of Baragund, was the wife of Hurin, lord of Dorloman, and their son was Turin, who was born in the year that Baron Echamion came upon Luthien in the forest of Naudorith. And she was beloved by Turin, her brother. Skipped a line. Dear goddess. A daughter they had also, who was called Lalaith, which is laughter, and she was beloved by Turin, her brother. But when she was 3 years old, there came a pestilence to Hithlam, born on an evil wind out of Angband, and she died. Now, after the Nenaeath and Nidiad, Morwen abode still in Dorloman, for Turin was but 8 years old, and she was again with child. Those days were evil, for the Easterlings that came into Hithlam despised the remnants. I'm watching you, cheeky boy. Honestly. For the Easterlings that came into Hithlam despised the remnant of the people of Hador, and they oppressed them and took their lands and their goods, and enslaved their children. But so great was the beauty and majesty of the Lady of Dorlomen that the Easterlings were afraid, and dared not to lay hands upon her or her household, and they whispered among themselves, saying that she was perilous, and a witch skilled in magic and in league with the elves. Yet she was now poor and without aid, save that she was succoured secretly by a kinswoman of Hurin named Iron, whom Broda, an Easterling, had taken as his wife. And Morwen feared greatly that Turin would be taken from her and enslaved. Therefore it came into her heart to send him away in secret, and to beg King Thingol to harbour him, for Beren, son of Barahir, was her father's kinsman, and he had been moreover a friend of Hurin ere evil befell. Therefore, in the autumn of the year of lamentation, Morwen sent Turin forth over the mountains with 2 aged servants, bidding them find entry if they could into the kingdom of Doriath. What are you doing, cheeky boy? Are you attacking little Bo in his own cage? New world leader. I'm wrong. It's Kermie who's going to be the next new world leader. Now listen, Kermie, you don't have to prove that you're the man of the house. You can just settle down with your big red beak and behave. He says, but Mama, I feel the urge to be an aggressor. Take over the world. Right, where? Therefore, we read that. With 2 aged servants, bidding them find entry, if they could, into the kingdom of Dariah. Thus was the fate of Turin woven, which is foretold in that lay that is called Nan-e-Hin-Horim, the tale of the children of Hurim, and is the longest of all the lays that speak of those days. Lay meaning a song or poem, not modern parlance. Just saying. Here that tale is told in brief, for it is woven with the fate of the Silmarils and of the elves, and it is called the tale of grief, for it is sorrowful, and in it are revealed most evil works of Morgoth Balglia. I'm just going to turn this around because I want to keep an eye on those birdie boys, and you can keep an eye on them too. And so, but then it's harder, isn't it? Because then my head blocks the view. Oh no, I can sort of see them. I'll just sit to the right here. I saw that, Kermie. Naughty. Being naughty. You'll go in your own cage if you're going to be naughty. He says, but Mama, I'm having fun. I'm being Kermie. I'm being the best Kermie I could possibly be. In the first beginning of the year, I think the little one's stirring them up a bit too, truth be known. No, he's not, he's eating. Right. In the first beginning of the year, Morwen gave birth to her child, the daughter of Hurim, and she named her Nienal, which is mourning. Oh, what a terrible thing to name your child. Jesus, cut the kids some slack. Talk about being bashed with the ugly stick, blamed for all the horror of the past, bestowed into like a softened off old Bortus on some kid, cursing them with a miserable fate like my fucking parents did to me. That she named me after an Australian beauty queen, Tanya Rook. I know, ridiculous, isn't it? She who remained a hobbit all her life and never grew up tall or beautiful. But you know, what do you expect when you're raised by narcissists? Put unreasonable expectations on you, even unreasonable and impossible expectations of beauty, for the love of all the gods. Now, I could have turned out tall like my father's family, I guess, so really it's no one's fault but just how my genes decided to express themselves, and stunted development from years of bloody trauma. It's enough to shrink your soul, if not your boots, people of Earth. But anyway, we'll carry on as per normal, doing it, carrying on like a pork chop for 60 in 6 days, it'll be 60 and a half years. I've done well, really. I have, to survive all those fucking lackluster, low entity monstrosities. Oh, my blood runs cold even just thinking about them, saying their names. I just have to take a cold shower, wash the slop and fuck off. Right, anyway, on a happy note, my boys still trying to kill each other? No, they're being good. They're not behaving like the Phillips. Philip's family, you know, riotous and pugnacious. They've been good boys at the moment. We'll see how long that lasts, people of Earth. Right, Nienor, which is mourning. But Turin and his companions, passing through great perils, came at last to the borders of Doriath, and there they were found by Beleg's strong bow, chief of the march wardens of King Thingol, who led them to Menegroth. Kermie! Talk about multitasking, having to have eyes in the back of your bloody head, literally. Right, that's your second strike. Your third strike, Kermie, and I'll grab you and put you in your own cage and shut you in. That'll be the end of your play time. So you play nice, or you'll get locked in your cage like a prisoner of your own love and your own stupidity at times. Honestly. Boys. Right, where were we? Then Thingol received Turin and took him even to his own fostering, in honour of Hurin the Steadfast. For Thingol's mood was changed towards the houses of the elf friends. Thereafter, messengers went north to Hithlum, bidding Morwen leave Dor Lormen and return with them to Doriath, but still she would not leave the house in which she had dwelt with Hurin. And when the elves departed, she sent with them the dragon helm of Dor Lormen, greatest of the heirlooms of the house of Hador. Dragon helm. Turin grew fair and strong in Doriath, but he was marked with sorrow. For 9 years he dwelt in Thingol's halls, and during that time his grief grew less, for messengers went at times to Hithlum, and returning they brought better tidings of Morwen and Nienor. But there came a day when the messengers did not return out of the north, and Thingol would send no more. Then Turin was filled with fear for his mother and his sister, and in grimness of heart he went before the king and asked for mail and sword, and he put on the dragon helm of Dor Lormen and went out to battle on the marches of Doriath, and became the companion in arms of Beleg Cuthalion. And when 3 years had passed, Turin returned again to Menegroth, but he came from the wild and was unkempt, and his gear and garments were way-worn. Now one there was in Doriath of the people of the Nundor, high in the councils of the king. Cyrus was his name. He had long begrudged to Turin the honour he received as Thingol's foster son, and seated opposite to him at the board, he taunted him, saying, "If the men of Hithlum are so wild and fell, of what sort are the women of that land? Do they run like deer, clad only in their hair?" Then Turin, in great anger, took up a drinking vessel and cast it at Cyrus, and he was grievously hurt. On the next day, Cyrus waylaid Turin as he set out from Menegroth to return to the marches. But Turin overcame him and set him to run naked as a hunted beast through the woods. Then Cyrus, fleeing in terror before him, fell into the chasm of a stream, and his body was broken on a great rock in the water. But others, coming, saw what was done, and Mablung was among them, and he bade Turin return with him to Menegroth and abide the judgment of the king, seeking his pardon. But Turin, deeming himself now an outlaw and fearing to be held captive, refused Mablung's bidding and turned swiftly away, and passing through the girdle of Milian, he came into the woods west of Sirion. And there he joined himself to a band of such houseless and desperate men as could be found in those evil days, lurking in the wild, and their hands were turned against all who came in their path, elves and men and orcs. But when all that had befallen was told and searched out before Thingol, the king pardoned Turin, holding him wronged. In that time, Beleg Strongbow returned from the north marches and came to Menegroth, seeking him. And Thingol spoke to Beleg, saying, I grieve, Cuthalion, for I took Hurin's son as my son, and so he shall remain, unless Hurin himself should return out of the shadows to claim his own. I would not have any say that Turin was driven forth unjustly into the wild, and gladly would I welcome him back, for I loved him well. A true father, loyal and loving and compassionate. I wonder what that feels like, people of Earth. And Beleg answered, I'm okay, 30 years of therapy. And Beleg answered, I will seek Turin until I find him, and I will bring him back to Menegroth, if I can, for I love him also. Then Beleg departed from Menegroth, and far across Beleriand he sought in vain for tidings of Turin through many perils. But Turin abode long among the outlaws, and became their captain, and he named himself Nithan the Wronged. Very warily they dwelt in the wooded land south of Teiglin, but when a year had passed since Turin fled from Doriath, Beleg came upon their lair by night. It chanced that at that time Turin was gone from the camp, and the outlaws seized Beleg and bound him, and treated him cruelly, for they feared him as a spy of the king of Doriath. But Turin, returning and seeing what was done, was stricken with remorse for all their evil and lawless deeds. Pardon me. And he released Beleg, and they renewed their friendship. And Turin forswore thenceforward war or plunder against all save the servants of Unbound. Then Beleg told Turin of King Thingol's pardon, and he sought to persuade him by all means that he might that he might, to return with him to Doriath, saying that there was great need of his strength and valour on the north marches of the realm. Bo! Little Bo! I can see you, little Bobo baby. He's a pretty birdie boy. You're a pretty birdie boy. Yes, you are. Of late the orcs have found a way down out of Tornulfún, he said. They have made a road through the pass of Anach. I do not remember it, said Turin. Never did we go so far from the borders, said Beleg. But you have seen the peaks of the Crissaegrim far off, and to the east the dark walls of the Gorgoroth. Anach lies between, above the high springs of Mundeb, a hard and dangerous road. Yet many come by it now, and Dunbar, which used to be in peace, is falling under the black hand, and the men of Bruthiel are troubled. We are needed there. But in the pride of his heart, Turin refused the pardon of the king, and the words of Beleg were of no avail to change his mood. And he, for his part, urged Beleg to remain with him in the lands west of Sirion, but that Beleg would not do, and he said, Hard you are, Turin, and stubborn. Now the turn is mine. If you wish indeed to have the strong bow beside you, look for me in Dunbar, for thither I shall return. On the next day, Beleg set out, and Turin went with him a bowshot from the camp, but he said nothing. Is it farewell then, son of Hurin? Said Beleg. Then Turin looked out westward, and he saw far off the great height of Amon-Rûth, and unwitting of what lay before him, he answered, You have said, Seek me in Dunbar, but I say, Seek for me in Amon-Rûth, else this is our last farewell. And then they parted in friendship, yet in sadness. Now Beleg returned to the 1,000 Caves, and coming before Thingol and Melian, he told them of all that had befallen, save only of his evil handling by Turin's companions. Then Thingol sighed, and he said, What more would Turin have me do? Give me leave, Lord, said Beleg, and I will guard him and guide him as I may. Then no man shall say that elven words are lightly spoken, nor would I wish to see so great a good run to nothing in the wild. Then Thingol gave Beleg leave to do as he would, and he said, Beleg Cuthalion, for many deeds you have earned my thanks, but not the least is the finding of my foster son. At this parting, ask for any gift, and I will not deny it to you. I ask then for a sword of worth, said Beleg, for the orcs come now too thick and close for a bow only. and such blade as I have is no match for their armour. Choose from all that I have, said Thingol, save only Aran Ruth, my own. Then Aran Ruth. I'm amused because my Hebrew name is Ruth Tanya, and my surname is Aaron, so Aran Ruth. Wow, there you go. Synchronicities, people there. Wow. Bit of a stretch, but no, not really. Aaron Ruth, Ruth Aaron. Close enough, but no chocolate fish. I can't see what the little munchkin's doing. Are you chewing your own beak, little snoopy? Sharpening it for little bow. Kermie! Oh, Kermie! Then Beleg chose Anglachel, and that was a sword of great worth. And it was so named because it was made of iron that fell from heaven as a blazing star. It would cleave all earth-delved iron. One other sword only in Middle-earth was like to it. That sword does not enter into this tale, though it was made of the same ore by the same smith, and that smith was Eol, the dark elf, who took Arethel Turgon's sister to wife. He gave Anglachel to Thingol as fee, which he begrudged, for leave to dwell in Nun Elmoth, but its mate, Angurel, he kept until it was stolen from him by Maeglin, his son. Who steals their father's sword? Some arsehole. But as Thingol turned the hilt of Anglachel towards Beleg, Melian looked at the blade, and she said, "There is malice in this sword. The dark heart of the smith still dwells in it. It will not love the hand it serves, neither will it abide with you long." "Nonetheless, I will wield it while I may," said Beleg. "Another gift I will give to you, Cuthalion," said Melian, "that shall be your help in the wild, and the help also of those whom you choose." And she gave him store of lembas, the waybread of the elves, wrapped in leaves of silver, and the threads that bound it were sealed at the knots with the seal of the Queen, a wafer of white wax shaped as a single flower of Telperion, for according to the customs of the Aldalaii, the keeping and giving of lembas belonged to the Queen alone. In nothing did Melian show greater favour to Turin than in this gift, for the elder had never before allowed men to use this waybread, and seldom did so again. Then Beleg departed with these gifts from Menegroth, and went back to the north marches, where he had his lodges and many friends. Then in Dunbar the orcs were driven back, and Anglachel rejoiced to be unsheathed. But when the winter came and war was stilled, suddenly his companions missed Peleg, and he returned to them no more. Sorry, I'm drifting. I'll explain to you why I'm drifting. Spirit is showing me my little sterling silver Yoda that I've made two. One for myself and one I made for my friend Lynn, who, by the way, I don't ever see wearing it. So if you're watching my video, Lynn, wear my jewellery I gave you. It was gifted to you for a reason. But I don't think she watches my YouTube. But anyway, they were showing me that, and they were telling me to make another one and to also gift it to someone. And I'm wondering what that's about. Because I'm hesitant to gift any more of my, hand cast sterling silver jewellery, unless it's for special occasions, because I'm just hesitant. So I'm trying to figure out why I'm being instructed to make another one. In fact, that person said they didn't want any gifts from me, which is why I didn't make them. And the Spirit's telling me now that they regret that, and they would dearly have loved a Yoda, pendant. But anyway, I'm not. I have no interest in trying to buy people's friendship or love or loyalty, and the gifts that were given to friends last year, from about December on, I gifted everyone until I think the last person I gifted was Luke from Ramjet, because it was the day before Valentine's Day when I did that injury to myself. So that was from the early December to the 13th of January. In that time period, I gifted several members of both bands, and then I thought, well, I've fulfilled my mission that I was set upon. It actually started with an instruction actually to make something for Paulie for his empowerment and protection and healing. So that's what sort of got me started on that journey of making specific little gifts for each of the friends in the bands. But yes, I'm wondering why they're telling me to make something for this person that told me point blank he didn't want any gifts from me. And then I replied truthfully that he'd already been gifted immensely by me. I had gifted him healing energy, so he nodded. And he's a very sweet and humble person. He hasn't put any demands, or not any of them have, don't get me wrong, but he made particularly a point of saying that he didn't ask for anything and wasn't expecting anything. But when I showed the photo of the Yoda to Luke from Alter Egos, who was sitting beside me at that point in time, he got terribly excited and said, I don't know, he said, you'll love it, look at it, and handed my phone over with the picture of Yoda, and then he kind of looked at me to say, oh yeah, that would have been kind of cool. So now I'm being instructed that perhaps that person might have changed their mind, but it's a huge chunk of sterling silver. It's very heavy. Shall I show it to you what I'm talking about, just as a point of reference? Because I've got one of the two that I created, and they were very difficult. The first one I made was very difficult because I was newly teaching myself casting, which is actually an intermediate skill, and I was a rank beginner. All the women in the Women's Metalsmith Collective were really impressed with me taking on a very difficult, for my school level, task. And then I had a lot of difficulty making Lynn's because for some reason I couldn't get the ears to form. It took me 5 attempts to finish hers. But anyway, I'll show you my one, just so you know what I'm raving on about. And I might even wear it, because I'm telling Lynn to wear it. Oh, oh. And I wouldn't be legally allowed to sell them because they're trademarked of the Star Wars. But I made it from a little plastic toy, and look, it's beautiful. But I can't put them on my. I can't make more and put them on my website without. I'd have to get permission from the Star Wars, whoever owns the trademark for that, to sell them on my Titania's Realm website. But you know, I don't see that there'd be any problem with me making them because I make them myself from that model and I'm gifting them. But he's a hefty little bugger. I wore him out dancing one night and he went flying around my neck because I was doing the mosh, and he actually hit me, and I thought, oh, that actually hurt. So you could actually hurl it at someone and do them a bit of a great injury, but not that that was my intention for making them. But isn't he cute? It's actually quite cute. I'm trying to get him when he doesn't keep blurring out. But anyway, so Yoda, the Force is with us, and you've got to stay on the bright side of the Force, my darlings. But anyway, it's interesting that I was being told that as I'm reading to you stories on my YouTube channel. As I said to you, this is what happens. I drift in and out, and my mind goes on little whirligigs, and then the spirits start giving me instructions on what they want me to do, and some of them I obey and some of them I don't, depending on, you know, if I deem it acceptable behaviour or worthy, or sometimes I'm on strong instructions to do something even if I don't necessarily agree with it. That can be a bit stressful to the heart, mind and spirit, because I don't like to do anything that is beyond my free will. But yes, Yoda. You're telling me make another Yoda. I could make another one. Each time I make it, it'll get easier too, because practice makes perfect. And yeah, the last one was Lynn's, but I got very distressed making Lynn's because for some reason his ears kept coming up all shortened and stumpy, and he just looked like Shrek. So anyway. And when you've made something yourself and put your own heart and soul and intention and energy into it, you know, it's not just a piece of jewellery anymore. It's got a certain vibrancy and a life force of its own, a little tiny piece of your soul embedded into it. And it's beautiful. It's like, I agree with what they were saying, where Melian said the sword had included the dark heart of the smith, and that it wouldn't bring anyone any luck. It will not love the hand it serves, neither will it abide with you for long. Because yeah, things develop their own soul and energy, especially with silver or gold, you melting down, you know, scrap or pieces of silver or gold and something that's perhaps been worn by someone else. You melt it down, it becomes renewed again, and then you're putting your energy into it. And it's kind of a powerful talismanic magic, people of Earth, that unless you make your own sterling silver or gold jewellery, most people aren't all that conscious of. It's why you need to be careful when you buy second-hand or antique jewellery or jewellery from someone who's just got a ugly, putrescent divorce, because you're taking on all that negativity and ugliness, and it's sometimes a bit hard to shift and you have no idea where that's come from. So if I buy anything second-hand or antique from antique shops, I smudge everything and purify it before I wear it, and before I work with it. Because after the life I've had, I certainly don't need any more fucking evil or negativity coming my way. That's for certain. Alright, where were we? And nothing did... do I read past there? No, it was up to that last paragraph. Then Beleg departed with his gifts from Menegroth and went back to the North Marches, where he had his lodges and many friends. Then in Dimbar the orcs were driven back, and Anglachel rejoiced to be unsheathed. But when the winter came and war was stilled, suddenly his companions missed Beleg, and he returned to them no more. Just closing the blind. It's the other way around now that the sun's out of my eyes. Now when Beleg parted from the outlaws and returned into Doriath, Turin led them away westward out of Sirian's Vale, for they grew weary of their life without rest, ever watchful and in fear of pursuit. And they sought for a safer lair. Are you swinging, my beautiful boy? He's swinging in a swing. You see it? He's a swinging boy. Swinging, Kermie. And Bobo. What are you doing, Bobo? What are you doing, little bird? You being good, little birdies? Yes, of course you are. You're my little angel faces. Whoa, look at Kermie go. He's rocking it from side to side. Rocking it from side to side. And it chanced at a time of evening that they came upon 3 dwarfs, who fled before them. But one that lagged behind was seized and thrown down. And a man of the company took his bow and let fly an arrow at the others as they vanished in the dusk. Now the dwarf that they had taken was named Me, and he pleaded for his life before Turin, and offered as ransom to lead them to his hidden halls, which none might find without his aid. Then Turin pitied Mim and spared him, and he said, "Where is your house?" Then Mim answered, "High above the lands lies the house of Mim, upon the great hill. Amon Ruth is that hill called now, since the elves changed all the names." Then Turin was silent, and he looked long upon the dwarfs, and at last he said, "You shall bring us to that place." On the next day they set out thither, following Mim to Amon Ruth. Now that hill stood upon the edge of the moorlands that rose between the vales of Sirion and Narog, and high above the stony heath it reared its crown, but its steep grey head was bare, save for the red seragon that mantled the stone. And as the men of Turin's band drew near, the sun, westering, broke through the clouds and fell upon the crown, and the seragon was all in flower. Then one among them said, "There is blood on the hilltop." But Mim led them by secret paths up the steep slopes of Amon Ruth, and at the mouth of his cave he bowed to Turin, saying, "Enter into Bar en Danweth, the house of ransom, for so it shall be called." And now there came another dwarf, bearing light to greet him, and they spoke together and passed swiftly down into the darkness of the cave. But Turin followed after, and came at length to a chamber far within, lit by dim lamps hanging upon chains. There he found Mim kneeling at a stone couch beside the wall, and he tore his beard and wailed, crying one name unceasingly, and on the couch there lay a third. But Turin, entering, stood beside Mim and offered him aid. Then Mim looked up at him and said, "You can give no aid, for this is Chin, my son, and he is dead, pierced by an arrow. He died at sunset, Ibun, my son, has told me." Then pity rose in Turin's heart, and he said to Mim, "Alas, I would recall that shaft if I could. Now Bar en Daweth, this house shall be called in truth, and if ever I come to any wealth, I will pay you a ransom of gold for your son, in token of sorrow, though it gladden your heart no more." Then Mim rose and looked long at Turin. "I hear you," he said. "You speak like a dwarf lord of old, and at that I marvel. Now my heart is cooled, though it is not glad, and in this house you may dwell if you will, for I will pay my ransom." So began the abiding of Turin in the hidden house of Mim upon Amon Ruth, and he walked on the green sword before the mouth of the cave, and looked out east and west and northward he looked, and descried the forest of Brithiel climbing green about Amon Obel in its midst, and thither his eyes were drawn ever and again. He knew not why, for his heart was set rather to the northwest, where league upon league away on the skirts of the sky it seemed to him that he could glimpse the mountains of shadow, the walls of his home. But at evening, Turin looked west into the sunset, as the sun rode down red into the hazes above the distant coasts, and the vale of Narog lay deep in the shadows between. In the time that followed, Turin spoke much with men, and sitting with him alone, he listened to his lore and the tale of his life. For men came of dwarves that were banished in ancient days from the great dwarf cities of the east, and long before the return of Morgoth, they wandered westward into Beleriand. But they became diminished in stature and in smithcraft, and they took to lives of stealth, walking with bowed shoulders and furtive steps. Before the dwarves of Nogrod and Balagost came west over the mountains, the elves of Beleriand knew not what these others were, and they hunted them and slew them. But afterwards they let them alone, and they were called Negith Nebin, the petty dwarves, in the Sindarin tongue. They loved none but themselves, and if they feared and hated the Orcs, they hated the Eldar no less, and the exiles most of all, for the Noldor, they said, had stolen their lands and their homes. Long ere King Finrod Felagund came over the sea, the caves of Nargothrond were discovered by them, and by them its delving was begun. And beneath the crown of Amon Ruth, the bald hill, the slow hands of the petty dwarves had bored and deepened the caves through the long years that they dwelt there, untroubled by the grey elves of the woods plural, sorry. But now, at last, they had dwindled and died out of Middle-earth, all save Mim and his 2 sons, and Mim was old even in the reckoning of dwarves, old and forgotten. And in his halls the smithies were idle and the axes rusted, and their name was remembered only in ancient tales of Doriath and Nargothrond. But when the year drew on to midwinter, snow came down from the north heavier than they had known it in the river vales, and Amon Ruth was covered deep, and they said that the winters worsened in Beleriand as the power of Angband grew. Then only the hardiest dared stir abroad, and some fell sick, and all were pinched with hunger. But in the dim dusk of a winter's day, there appeared suddenly among them a man, as it seemed, of great bulk and girth, cloaked and hooded in white, and he walked up to the fire without a word, and when men sprang up in fear, he laughed and threw back his hood, and beneath his wide cloak he bore a great pack, and in the light of the fire Turin looked again on the face of Beleg Cuthalion. finish springing, my little handsome boys? Oh, Kumi's springing. Kumi loves springing. What does Bo love doing? Sweet fuck all, but anyway. He's so cute. Thus, Beleg returned once more to Turin, and their meeting was glad. Just shines a bit of my face. And with him he brought out of Dunbar the dragon helm of Dor Lormen, thinking that it might lift Turin's thought again above his life in the wilderness as the leader of a petty company. But still, Turin would not return to Doriath, and Beleg, yielding to his love against his wisdom, remained with him and did not depart. And in that time he laboured much for the good of Turin's company. Those that were hurt or sick he tended and gave to them the lembas of Melian, and they were quickly healed, for, though the grey elves were less in skill and knowledge than the exiles from Valinor in the ways of the life of Middle-earth, they had a wisdom beyond the reach of men. And because Beleg was strong and enduring, far-sighted in mind as in eye, he came to be held in honour among the outlaws. But the hatred of Mim for the elf that had come into Bar-en-Dawith grew ever greater, and he sat with Ebon his son in the deepest shadows of his house, speaking to none. But Turin paid now little heed to the dwarf, and when winter passed and spring came, they had sterner work to do. Who knows now the counsels of Morgoth? Who can measure the reach of his thought? Who had been Melkor mighty among the Ainur of the great song, and sat now a dark lord upon a dark throne in the north, weighing in his malice all the tidings that came to him, and perceiving more of the deeds and purposes of his enemies than even the wisest of them feared, save only Melian, the queen. To her often the thought of Morgoth reached out, and there was foiled, meaning she blocked his telepathy, people of Earth. Handy skill to have, by the way, knowing how to block other people's evil thoughts. And now, again, the might of Unbound was moved, and as the long fingers of a groping hand, the forerunners of his armies probed the ways into Valeriand, through Anach they came, and Dunbar was taken, and all the north marches of Doriath. Down the ancient road they came that led through the long defile of Sirion, past the isle where Minas Tirith of Finrod had stood, and so through the land between Muldoon and Sirion, and on through the eaves of Guthiel to the crossings of Teiglin. Thence the road went on into the guarded plain, But the orcs did not go far upon it as yet, for there dwelt now in the wild a terror that was hidden, and upon the red hill were watchful eyes of which they had not been warned. For Turin put on again the helm of Hador, and far and wide in Beleriand the whisper went, under wood and over stream, and through the passes of the hills, saying that the helm and bow that had fallen in Dunbar had arisen again beyond hope. Then many, who went leaderless, dispossessed, but undaunted, took heart again and came to seek the two captains. Dor Cuathol, the land of bow and helm, was in that time named all the region between Teiglin and the west march of Dariath, and Turin named himself anew Gorthol, the dread helm. My goodness, did I not say 3 strikes he's out? Have to stay true to my word even if it's with the birdies. Anyway, you've got to go back and you'll match your stuff because it's getting dark. It's getting dark, so yes, it's burning up. Yes, it's burning on my right. Okay. No, it's not negotiable. 3 strikes you're out, mate. That's it. Is it kissing? Here you go. Good boy. And grow with your brother, you can go on the young page. It's to be fun when you hang out together, not being bloody brutalised. Right. Right. As you go on your swim, you be a good boy now. Good luck with that, Mummy too. It's feisty. He's a feisty little devil today. What can I say? Where is he? Can you see him? Ah, there he is. All right. Might get another drink of water. Oh, let's just finish the page before I get a drink of water, otherwise I'll get lost. And Turin named himself anew Gorthol, the dread helm, and his heart was high again. In Menegroth and in the deep halls of Nargothrond, and even in the hidden realm of Gondolin, the fame of the deeds of the 2 captains was heard, and in Angband also they were known. Then Morgoth laughed, for now by the dragon helm was Hurin's son revealed to him again, and ere long Amon Ruth was ringed with spies. Right, let me just get myself another glass of water. You happy that that mean bird's out of your cage? Or now you're sorry because now you're twittering like a mad little birdie? Oh, Bo! I said 3 strikes, he's out. You can play quietly now without being beaten up by your brother. I know. Brothers from other mothers. Interspecies wars has to stop it. Sacred space. Got to live in harmony or sling your hook, people of Earth. Don't tolerate violence in this house. Absolutely not. Alright. In the waning of the year, Mim the dwarf and Ibun his son went out from Bar en Daweth to gather roots in the wild for their winter store, and they were taken captive by orcs. Then for a second time, Mim promised to guide his enemies by the secret paths to his home on Amon Ruth, and yet he sought to delay the fulfillment of his promise and demanded that Gorthol should not be slain. Then the orc captain laughed, and he said to Mem, "Assuredly Turin, son of Hurin, shall not be slain." Thus was Barin Daweth betrayed, for the orcs came upon it by night at unawares, guided by Mim. There many of Turin's company were slain as they slept, but some, fleeing by an inner stair, came out upon the hilltop, and there they fought until they fell, and their blood flowed out upon the seragon that mantled the stone. But a net was cast over Turin as he fought, and he was enmeshed in it, and overcome, and led away. And at length, when all was silent again, Mim crept out of the shadows of his house, and as the sun rose over the mists of Sirion, he stood beside the dead men on the hilltop. But he perceived that not all those that lay there were dead, for by one his gaze was returned, and he looked in the eyes of Beleg the elf. Then with hatred long stored, Mim stepped up to Beleg and drew forth the sword Anglachel that lay between the body of one that had fallen beside him. But Beleg, stumbling, seized back the sword and thrust it at the dwarf, and Mim, in terror, fled wailing from the hilltop. And Beleg cried after him, "The vengeance of the house of Hador will find you yet." Now Beleg was sorely wounded, but he was mighty among the elves of Middle-earth, and he was, moreover, a master of healing. Therefore he did not die, and slowly his strength returned, and he sought in vain among the dead for Turin to bury him. But he found him not, and then he knew that Hurin's son was yet alive and taken to Angband. With little hope, Beleg departed from Amon Ruth and set out northward towards the crossings of Taiglim, following in the track of the orcs, and he crossed over the Brithiach and journeyed through Dunbar towards the pass of Anach. And now he was not far behind them, for he went without sleeping, whereas they had tarried on their road, hunting in the lands and fearing no pursuit as they came northward, and not even in the dreadful woods of Tornufun did he swerve from the trail, for the skill of Beleg was greater than any that have been in Middle-earth. But as he passed by night through that evil land, he came upon one lying asleep at the foot of a great dead tree, and Beleg, staying his steps, beside the sleeper, saw Oh, there. Couldn't see him. Saw that it was an elf. Then he spoke to him and gave him lembas and asked him what fate had brought him to that terrible place. And he named himself Gwyndor, son of Gwylyn. Grieving, Beleg looked upon him, for Gwyndor was now but a bent and fearful shadow of his former shape and mood. When in the Neneth Anidiad that lord of Nargothrond rode with rash courage to the very doors of Angband, and there was taken. For few of the Noldor whom Morgoth captured were put to death because of their skill in forging and in mining for metals and gems. And Gwyndor was not slain, but put to labour in the mines of the north. By secret tunnels known only to themselves, the mining elves might sometimes escape, and thus it came to pass that Beleg found him, spent and bewildered, in the mazes of Tornufun. And Gwyndor told him that, as he lay and lurked among the trees, he saw a great company of orcs passing northwards, and wolves went with them, and among them was a man whose hands were chained, and they drove him onward with whips. Very tall he was, said Gwyndor, as tall as are the men from the misty hills of Hithlum. Then Beleg told him of his own errand in Tornufun, and Gwyndor sought to dissuade him from his quest, saying that he would but join Turin in the anguish that awaited him. But Beleg would not abandon Turin, and despairing himself, he aroused hope again in Gwyndor's heart. And together they went on, following the orcs, until they came out of the forest on the high slopes that ran down to the barren dunes of Anfalglyph. There, within sight of the peaks of Thumgorodrim, the orcs made their encampment in a bare dell as the light of day was failing, and setting wolf sentinels all about, they fell to carousing. A great storm rode up out of the west, and lightning glittered on the shadowy mountains far away, as Beleg and Gwyndor crept towards the dell. When all in the camp were sleeping, Beleg took his bow, and in the darkness, took his bow, sorry. I read that the wrong insinuation, taking a bow. Well, my daughter's an actress, so, you do take a bow at the end of a wonderful performance. But taking a bow and shooting something is a fish of a different kettle. So let me repeat that. When all in the camp were sleeping, Beleg took his bow, and in the darkness shot the wolf sentinels, one by one and silently. Then in great peril they entered in, and they found Turin fettered hand and foot, and tied to a withered tree, and all about him knives that had been cast at him were embedded in the trunk, and he was senseless in a sleep of great weariness. But Beleg and Gwyndor cut the bonds that held him, and lifting him they carried him out of the dell. Yet they could bear him no further than to a thicket of thorn trees a little way above. There they laid him down, and now the storm drew very near. Beleg drew his sword, Anlachel, and with it he cut the fetters that bound Turin. But fate was that day more strong, for the blade slipped as he cut the shackles, and Turin's foot was pricked. Then he was aroused into a sudden wakefulness of rage and fear, and seeing one bending over him with naked blade, he leapt up with a great cry, believing that orcs were come again to torment him, and grappling with him in the darkness, he seized Anlachel and slew Beleg Cuthalion, thinking him a foe. But as he stood, finding himself free and ready to sell his life dearly against imagined foes, there came a great flash of lightning above them, and in its light he looked down on Beleg's face. Then Turin stood stone still and silent, staring on that dreadful death, knowing what he had done, and so terrible was his face, lit by the lightning that flickered all about them, that Gwyndor cowered down upon the ground and dared not raise his eyes. But now, in the dell beneath, the orcs were aroused, and all the camp was in a tumult, for they feared the thunder that came out of the west, believing that it was sent against them by the great enemies beyond the sea. Then a wind arose, and great rains fell, and torrents swept down from the heights of Tornafun, and though Gwyndor cried out to Turin, warning him of their utmost peril, he made no answer, but sat unmoving and unweeping in the tempest beside the body of Beleg Cuthalion. When morning came, the storm was passed away eastward over Lochlann, and the sun of autumn rose hot and bright. But believing that Turin would have fled far away from that place, and all trace of his flight be washed away, the orcs departed in haste, without longer search, and far off Gwyndor saw them marching away over the steaming sands of Anfalglith. Thus it came to pass that they returned to Morgoth empty-handed, and left behind them the son of Hurin, who sat crazed and unwitting on the slopes of Tornafun, bearing a burden heavier than their bonds. And then Gwyndor roused Turin to aid him in the burial of Beleg. And as he rose as one that walked in sleep, and together they laid Beleg in a shallow grave, and placed beside him Balthronding, his great bow that was made of black yew wood. But the dread sword Anglachel Gwyndor took, saying that it were better that it should take vengeance on the servants of Morgoth than lie useless in the earth. And he took also the lembas of Melian to strengthen them in the wild. Thus ended Beleg Strongbow, truest of friends, greatest in skill of all that harboured in the woods of Beleriand in the elder days, at the hand of him whom he most loved. And that grief was graven on the face of Turin, and never faded. But courage and strength were renewed in the elf of Norgothrond, and departing from Tornufun, he led Turin far away. Never once as they wandered together on long and grievous paths did Turin speak, and he walked as one without wish or purpose, while the year waned and winter drew on over the northern lands. But Gwyndor was ever beside him to guard him and guide him, and thus they passed westward over Sirion, and came at length to Eithel Evreen, the springs whence Narog rose beneath the the mountains of shadow. There Gwyndor spoke to Turin, saying, "Awake, Turin, son of Hurin Thalion. On Evreen's lake is endless laughter. She is fed from crystal fountains unfailing, and guarded from defilement by Ulmo, Lord of Waters, who wrought her beauty in ancient days." Then Turin knelt and drank from that water, and suddenly he cast himself down, and his tears were unloosed at last, and he was healed of his madness. There he made a song for Beleg, and he named it Ler Cupeleg, the song of the great bow, singing it aloud, heedless of peril. And Gwyndor gave the sword Anglachel into his hands, and Turin knew that it was heavy and strong, and had great power. But its blade was black and dull, and its edges blunt. And then Gwyndor said, "This is a strange blade, and unlike any that I have seen in Middle-earth. It mourns for Beleg, even as you do. But be comforted, for I return to the Nargothrond of the house of Finarfin, and you shall come with me, and be healed and renewed." "Who are you?" said Turin. "A wandering elf, a thrall escaped, whom Beleg met and comforted," said Gwyndor. Yet once I was Gwyndor, son of Gwilym, a lord of Nargothrond, until I went to the Nenagh and Neadydd and was enslaved in Anband. Then have you seen Huron, son of Galdor, the warrior of Dorlomen? Said Turin. I have not seen him, said Gwyndor, but rumour of him runs through Angband that he still defies Morgoth, and Morgoth has laid a curse upon him and all his kin. That I do believe, said Turin. And now they arose, and departing from Eifel Ivrin, they journeyed southward along the banks of Narog until they were taken by scouts of the elves and brought up as prisoners to the hidden stronghold. Thus did Turin come to Nargothrond. At first his own people did not know Gwyndor, who went out young and strong, and returned now seeming as one of the aged among mortal men, because of his torments and his labours. But Finduilas, daughter of Orodreth the king, knew him and welcomed him, for she had loved him before the Nearnaeth, and so greatly did Gwyndor love her beauty that he named her Ffaelfryn, which is the gleam of the sun on the pools of Ivrin. For Gwyndor's sake, Turin was admitted with him into Nargothrond, and he dwelt there in honour. But when Gwyndor would tell his name, Turin checked him, saying, I am Agawain, the son of Ulmath, which is the blood-stained son of ill fate, a hunter in the woods. And the elves of Nargothrond questioned him no more. In the time that followed, Turin grew high in favour with Orodreth, and well nigh all hearts were turned to him in Nargothrond. For he was young and only now reached his full manhood, and he was in truth the son of Morwen Elithwin to look upon, dark-haired and pale-skinned with grey eyes, and his face more beautiful than any other among mortal men in the elder days. His speech and bearing were that of the ancient kingdom of Doriath, and even among the elves he might be taken for one from the great houses of the Noldor. Therefore many called him Adonathan, the elf man. The sword Anlachel was forged anew for him by cunning smiths of Nargothrond, and though ever black its edges shone with pale fire, and he named it Gurthon, Iron of Death. So great was his prowess and skill in warfare on the confines of the guarded plain that he himself became known as Mormegil, the Black Sword, and the elves said, the Mormegil cannot be slain save by mischance, or an evil arrow from afar. Therefore, they gave him dwarf mail to guard him, and in a grim mood he found also in the armories a dwarf mask, all gilded, and he put it on before battle, and his enemies fled before his face. Then the heart of Finduilas was turned from Gwyndor, and against her will her love was given to Turin. But Turin did not perceive what had befallen, and being torn in heart, Finduilas became sorrowful, and she grew wan and silent. But Gwyndor sat in dark thought, and on a time he spoke to Finduilas, saying, Daughter of the house of Finarfin, let no grief lie between us, for though Morgoth has laid my life in ruin, you still I love. Go whither love leads you, yet beware. It is not fitting that the elder children of Iluvatar should wed with the younger, nor is it wise, for they are brief and soon pass, to leave us in widowhood while the world lasts. Neither will fate suffer it, unless it be once or twice only, for some high cause of doom that we do not perceive. But this man is not a baron. A doom indeed lies on him, as seeing eyes may well read in him, but a dark doom. Enter not into it, and if you will, your love shall betray you to bitterness and death. For hearken to me, though he be indeed Agawain, son of Ulmath, his right name is Turin, son of Burin, whom Morgoth holds in unbound, and whose kin he has cursed. Doubt not the power of Morgoth Bauglir. Is it not written in me? Then Finduilas sat long in thought, but at the last she said only, Turin, son of Hurin, loves me not, nor will. Now when Turin learnt from Finduilas of what had passed, he was wrathful, and he said to Gwyndor, in love I hold you for rescue and safekeeping. But now you have done ill to me, friend, to betray my right name and call my doom upon me, from which I would lie hid. But Gwyndor answered, the doom lies in yourself, not in your name. When it became known to Orodreth that the Mormegil was in truth the son of Hurin Thalion, he gave him great honour, and Turin became mighty among the people of Nargothrond. But he had no liking for their manner of warfare, of ambush and stealth and secret arrow. And he yearned for brave strokes and battle in the open, and his counsels weighed with the king ever the longer for more. In those days the elves of Nargothrond forsook their secrecy, and went openly to battle, and great store of weapons were made. And by the counsel of Turin, the Noldor built a mighty bridge over the Narog from the doors of Felagund, for the swifter passage of their arms. Then the servants of Angband were driven out of all the land between Narog and Sirion eastward and westward to the Nenning and the desolate Falas. And though Gwyndor spoke ever against Turin in the council of the king, holding it an ill policy, he fell into dishonour, and none heeded him, for his strength was small, and he was no longer forward in arms. Thus Nargothrond was revealed to the wrath and hatred of Morgoth. But still, in Turin's prayer, his true name was not spoken, and though the fame of his deeds came into Doriath and to the heirs of Thingol, rumour spoke only of the black sword of Nargothrond. In that time of respite and hope, when, because of the deeds of the Mormegil, the power of Morgoth was stemmed west of Sirion, Morwen fled at last from Dor Lormin with Nienor her daughter, and adventured the long journey to Thingol's halls. There new grief awaited her, for she found Turin gone, and to Doriath there had come no tidings, since the dragon Helm had vanished from the lands west of Sirion. But Morwen remained in Doriath with Nienor as guests of Thingol and Melian, and were treated with honour. Now it came to pass, when 495 years had passed since the rising of the moon in the spring of the year, there came to Nargothrond 2 elves named Galmir and Aminus, and they were of Angrod's people, but since the Dagor Bragalach they dwelt in the south with Círdan the shipwright. From their far journeys they brought tidings of a great mustering of orcs and evil creatures under the eaves of Ered Wethrin and in the pass of Sirion. And they told also that Ulmo had come to Círdan, giving warning that great peril drew nigh to Nargothrond. Hear the words of the Lord of Waters, said they to the king. Thus he spoke to Círdan the shipwright. The evil of the north has defiled the springs of Sirion, and my power withdraws from the fingers of the flowing waters. But a worse thing is yet to come forth. Say therefore to the Lord of Nargothrond, shut the doors of the fortress, and go not abroad. Cast the stones of your pride into the loud river, that the creeping evil may not find the gate. Orodreth was troubled by the dark words of the messengers, but Turin would by no means hearken to these counsels, and least of all would he suffer the great bridge to be cast down, for he was become proud and stern, and would order all things as he wished. Soon afterwards, Hundir, lord of Brethiel, was slain, for the Orcs invaded his land, and Hundir gave them battle. But the men of Brethiel were worsted and driven back into their woods. And in the autumn of the year, biding his hour, Morgoth loosed upon the people of Narog the great host that he had long prepared, and Glaurung the Uruluki passed over Unfalblith and came thence into the north vales of Sirion, and there did great evil. Under the shadows of Eredrethren he defiled the Eifel Ivreen, and thence he passed into the realm of Nargothrond, and burned the Talath Dirnen, the guarded plain between Narog and Teiglin. Then the warriors of Nargothrond went forth, and tall and terrible on that day looked Turin, and the heart of the host was upheld as he rode on the right hand of Orodreth. But greater far was the host of Morgoth than any scouts had told, and none but Turin, defended by his dwarf mask, could withstand the approach of Glaurung, and the elves were driven back and pressed by the Orcs into the field of Tumhalad between Ginglith and Narog, and there they were penned. On that day all the pride and host of Nargothrond withered away, and Orodreth was slain in the forefront of the battle, and Gwyndor, son of Gulin, was wounded to the death. But Turin came to his aid, and all fled before him, and he bore Gwyndor out of the rout, and escaping into a wood, there he laid him on the grass. Then Gwyndor said to Turin, "Let bearing pay for bearing." But ill-fated was mine, and vain is thine, for my body is marred beyond healing, and I must leave Middle-earth. And though I love thee, son of Hurin, yet I rue the day that I took thee from the Orcs. But for thy prowess and thy pride, still I should have love and life, and Nargothrond should yet stand awhile. Now if thou love me, leave me. Haste thee to Nargothrond and save Finduilas. And this last I say to thee, she alone stands between thee and thy doom. If thou fail her, it shall not fail to find thee. Farewell. Then Turin sped back to Nargothrond, mustering such of the rout as he went with on the way. And the leaves fell from the trees in a great wind as they went, for the autumn was passing to a dire winter. But the host of the orcs and Glaurung the dragon were there before him, and they came suddenly, ere those that were left on guard were aware of what had befallen on the field of Tumhalad. In that day the bridge over Narog proved an evil, for it was great and mightily made, and could not swiftly be destroyed. But the enemy came readily over the deep river, and Glaurung came in full fire against the doors of Felagund, and overthrew them, and passed within. And even as Turin came up, the dreadful sack of Nargothrond was well nigh achieved. The orcs had slain or driven off all that remained in arms, and were even then ransacking the great halls and chambers, plundering and destroying. But those of the women and maidens that were not burned or slain, they had herded on the terraces before the doors, as slaves to be taken into Morgoth's thraldom. Upon this ruin and woe Turin came, and none could withstand him, or would not, although he struck down all before him, and passed over the bridge, and hewed his way toward the captives. But now he stood alone, for the few that followed him had fled. But in that moment Glaurung issued from the gaping doors, and lay behind between Turin and the bridge. Then suddenly he spoke by the evil spirit that was in him, saying, "Hail, son of Hurin, well met." Then Turin sprang about and strode against him, and the edges of Gorthang shone as with flame, but Glaurung withheld his blast, and opened wide his serpent eyes, and gazed upon Turin. Without fear, Turin looked into them as he raised up the sword, and straightway he fell under the binding spell of the lidless eyes of the dragon, and was haltered moveless. Then for a long time he stood as one graven of stone, and they two were alone, silent before the doors of Nargothrond. But Glaurung spoke again, taunting Turin, and he said, "Evil have been all thy ways, son of Hurin, thankless fosterling, outlaw, slayer of thy friend, thief of love, usurper of Nargothrond, captain foolhardy and deserter of thy kin. As thralls, thy mother and thy sister live in Dol Lomin, in misery and want. Thou art arrayed as a prince, but they go in rags, and for thee they yearn, but thou carest not for that. Glad may thy father be to learn that he had such a son, as learn he shall. And Turin, being under the spell of Glaurung, hearkened to his words, and saw himself as in a mirror, misshapen by malice, and loathed that which he saw. And while he was yet held by the eyes of the dragon in torment of mind, and could not stir, the orcs drove away the herded captives, and they passed nigh to Turin and crossed over the bridge. Among them was Thundulas, and she cried out to Turin as she went, but not until her cries and the wailing of the captives was lost upon the northward road did Glaurung release Turin, and he might not stop his ears against that voice that haunted him after. Then suddenly Glaurung withdrew his glance and waited, and Turin stirred slowly as one waking from a hideous dream. Then, coming to himself, he sprang upon the dragon with a cry. But Glaurung laughed, saying, "If thou wilt be slain, I will slay thee gladly. But small help will that be to Morwen and Nienor. No heed didst thou give to the cries of the elf woman. Wilt thou deny also the bond of thy blood?" But Turin, drawing back his sword, stabbed at the dragon's eyes, and Glaurung, coiling back swiftly, towered above him and said, "Nay, at least thou art valiant, beyond all whom I have met. And they lie who say that we of our part do not honour the valour of foes. See now, I offer thee freedom. Go to thy kin if thou canst. Get thee gone. And if elf or man be left to make tale of these days, then surely in scorn they will name thee, if thou spurnest this gift." Then Turin, being yet bemused by the eyes of the dragon, as were he treating with a foe that could no pity, believed the words of Glaurung, and turning away he sped over the bridge. But as he went, Glaurung spoke behind him, saying in a foul voice, "Haste thee now, son of Hurin, to Dor Lumen, or perhaps the orcs shall come before thee once again. And if thou tarry for Thundulas, then never shalt thou see Morwen again, and never at all shalt thou see Nienor thy sister, and they will curse thee." But Turin passed away on the northward road, and Glaurung laughed once more, for he had accomplished the errand of his master. Then he turned to his own pleasure and sent forth his blast and burned all about him. But all the orcs that were busy in the sack he routed forth and drove them away, denied them their plunder, even to the last thing of worth. The bridge then he broke down and cast into the foam of Narog, and being thus secure, he gathered all the hoard and riches of Felagund, and heaped them, and lay upon them in the innermost hall, and rested a while. And Turin hastened along the ways to the north, through the lands now desolate between Narog and Teiglin, and the fell winter came down to meet him, for in that year snow fell ere autumn was past, and spring came late and cold. Ever it seemed to him as he went that he heard the cries of Findulas, calling his name by wood and hill, and great was his anguish. But his heart, being hot with the lies of Glaurung, and seeing ever in his mind the orcs burning the house of Hurin and putting Morwen and Nienor to torment, he held on his way and turned never aside. At last, worn by haste and a long road, for 40 leagues and more had he journeyed without rest, he came with the first ice of winter to the pools of Ivrin, where before he had been healed. But they were now but a frozen mire, and he could drink there no more. Thus he came hardly by the passes of Dolomin, through bitter snows from the north, and found again the land of his childhood. Bare and bleak it was, and Morwen was gone. Her house stood empty, broken and cold, and no living thing dwelt nigh. Therefore Turin departed, and came to the house of Brodda the Easterling, he that had to wife Irene, Hurin's kinswoman, and there he learned of an old servant that Morwen was long gone, for she had fled with Nienor out of Dolomin, none but Irene knew where. Then Turin strode to Brodda's table, and seizing him, he drew his sword and demanded that he be told whither Morwen had gone. And Irene declared to him that she went to Doriath to seek her son. For the lands were freed then from evil, she said, by the black sword of the south, who now has fallen, they say. Then Turin's eyes were opened, and the last threads of Glaurung's spell were loosed. And for anguish and wrath at the lies that had deluded him, and hatred of the oppressors of Morwen, a black rage seized him, and he slew Brodda in his hall, and other Easterlings that were his guests. Thereafter he fled out into the winter, a hunted man. But he was aided by some that remained of Hador's people, and knew the ways of the wild, and with them he escaped through the falling snow, and came to an outlaw's refuge in the southern mountains of Dor Lomin. Thence Turin passed again from the land of his childhood and returned to Sirion's vale. His heart was bitter, for to Dor Lomin he had brought only greater woe upon the remnant of his people, and they were glad of his going. And this comfort alone he had, that by the prowess of the black sword the ways to Doriath had been laid open to Morwen. And he said in his thought, then those deeds wrought not evil to all, and where else might I have been better bestowed my kin, even had I come sooner? For if the girdle of Melian be broken, then last hope is ended. Nay, it is better indeed as things be, for a shadow I cast wheresoever I come. Let Melian keep them, and I will leave them in peace, unshadowed, for a while. Now Turin coming down from Ered Wethrin sought for Findulas in vain, roaming the woods beneath the mountains, wild and wary as a beast. And he waylaid all the roads that went north to the pass of Sirion. But he was too late, for all the trails had grown old or were washed away by the winter. Yet thus it was that passing southwards down Ty Glen that sorry, trying to unplug my phone while reading. Multitask. That's a bit mad, people. Dear goddess. And yet thus it was that passing southwards down Ty Glen, Turin came upon some of the men of Brithiel that were surrounded by orcs, and he delivered them, for the orcs fled from Gurthang. He named himself a wild man of the woods, and they besought him to come and dwell with them. But he said that he had an errand yet unachieved, to seek Findulas, Orodreth's daughter, of Nargothrond. Then Dorlas, the leader of those woodmen, told the grievous tidings of her death. For the men of Brithiel had waylaid at the crossings of Ty Glen the orc host that led the captives of Nargothrond, hoping to rescue them, but the orcs had at once cruelly slain their prisoners, and Findulas they pinned to a tree with a spear. So she died, saying at the last, tell the Mormagil that Findulas is here. Therefore they had laid her in a mound near that place, and named it Houth in Aleph, the mound of the elf maid. Turin bade them lead him thither, and there he fell down in a darkness of grief that was near death. Then Dorlas by his black sword, the fame whereof had come even into the deeps of Brithiel, and by his quest of the king's daughter, knew that this wild man was indeed the Mór Mageal of Nargothrond, whom rumour said was the son of Hurin of Dor-Lormin. Therefore the woodmen lifted him up and bore him away to their homes. Now those were set in a stockade upon a high place in the forest. Eiffel Brandir upon Amon Albel, for the people of Haleth were now dwindled by war, and Brandir, son of Handir, who ruled them, was a man of gentle mood, and lame also from childhood, and he trusted rather in secrecy than in deeds of war to save them from the power of the north. Therefore he feared the tidings that Dorlas brought, and when he beheld the face of Turin as he lay on the bier, a cloud of foreboding lay upon his heart. Nonetheless, being moved by his woe, he took him into his own house and tended him, for he had skill in healing. And with the beginning of spring, Turin cast off his darkness and grew hale again, and he arose, and he thought that he would remain in Brithiel, hidden, and put his shadow behind him, forsaking the past. He took therefore a new name, Turambar, which in the high elven speech signified Master of Doom, and he besought the woodmen to forget that he was a stranger among them, or ever bore any other name. Nonetheless, he would not wholly leave deeds of war, for he could not endure that the orcs should come to the crossings of Teiglin or draw nigh to Howth in Eleth, and he made that a place of dread for them, so that they shunned it. But he laid his black sword by, and wielded rather the bow and the spear. Now new tidings came to Doriath concerning Nargothrond, for some that had escaped from the defeat and the sack, and had survived the fell winter in the wild, came at last to Thingol seeking refuge, and the march wardens brought them to the king, and some said that all the enemy had withdrawn northwards, and others that Glaurung abode still in the halls of Felagund, and some still that the Mór Mageal was slain, and others that he was cast under a spell by the dragon, and dwelt there yet as one changed to stone. But all declared that it was known to many in Nargothrond ere the end that the Mór Mageal was none other than Turin, son of Hurin of Dor-Lormin. Then Morwen was distraught, and refusing the counsel of Melian, she rode forth alone into the wild to seek her son, or some true tidings of him. Thingol therefore sent Mablung after her, with many hardy marchwards, to find her and guard her, and to learn what news they might. But Nienor was bidden to remain behind. Yet the fearlessness of her house was hers, and in an evil hour, in hope that Morwen would return, when she saw that her daughter would go with her into peril, Nienor disguised herself as one of Thingol's people, and went with that ill-fated riding. They came upon Morwen by the banks of Surion, and Mablung, or Mablung, Mablung, besought her to return to Menegroth, but she was fey, and would not be persuaded. Then also the coming of Nienor was revealed, and despite Morwen's command, she would not go back, and Mablung perforce brought them to the hidden ferries at the Mares of Twilight, and they passed over Surion, and after 3 days' journeying they came to Amon Ethir, the hill of spies that long ago Felagund had caused to be raised with great labour a league before the doors of Nargothrond. There Mablung set a guard of riders about Morwen and her daughter and forbade them to go further. But he, seeing from the hill no sign of any enemy, went down with his scouts to the Narog as stealthily as they could go. But Glaurung was aware of all they did, and he came forth in heat of wrath, and lay into the river, and a vast vapour and foul reek went up, in which Mablung and his company were blinded and lost. Then Glaurung passed east over Narog. We're running out of time. We've just got 30 minutes left. So this will be a 2-part video as I suspected. But maybe if I forge ahead I can finish it. It's only 4 pages. In half an hour, can we do it? I want to put my birdies to bed, guys, so we'll just interrupt just then. I'll take their blankets over their heads, over their cages. Oh, don't worry, little one. It's just none of them blankets. I know. You sleepy bedtime time. I'm going to get out of your room, sir, so you can sleep. Kings of Holland Park, kings of sacred space, little virgin kings. Aren't you my little handsome boy? My sweet little one, my darling, my precious. Yes. King of the cockatiels and king of the Indian ringlets. Thou art anointed by the Mama T. Well, we have our own little realm, don't we, darlings? Kings and queens of our court, our fantasies. Prisoners of the Australian government can't even have a fucking holiday in New Zealand without their permission. Mind you, don't have any money, so that's a bit moot, but it's just vile how I ended up, people. Vileness laid upon vileness, laid upon vileness. Just saying. It's the truth too. Right. Well, birdies, Mama's got half an hour to get out of your room. Close the blind. Get at least ready. Right. We'll continue on, even though I really should get out of their room so they can rest. We'll continue on. Seeing the onset of the dragon, The guards upon Amon Ethir sought to lead Morwen and Nianor away, and fly with them with all speed back eastwards, but the wind bore the blank mists upon them, and their horses were maddened by the dragon's stench, and were ungovernable, and ran this way and that, so that some were dashed against trees and were slain, and others were borne far away. Thus the ladies were lost, and of Morwen indeed no sure tidings came ever to Doriath after. But Nianor, being thrown by her steed, yet unhurt, made her way back to Amon Ethir, there to await Mablung, and came thus above the reek into the sunlight. And looking westward, she stared straight into the eyes of Glaurung, whose head lay upon the hilltop. Her will strove with him for a while, but he put forth his power, and having learned who she was, he constrained her to gaze into his eyes, and he laid a spell of utter darkness and forgetfulness upon her, so that she could remember nothing. Was a spammer. So that she could remember nothing that had ever befallen her. Put my phone on silent. I should have done anyway. Don't know how to do it. Oh, anyway, doesn't matter. Sorry, and he laid a spell of utter darkness and forgetfulness upon her, so that she could remember nothing that had ever befallen her, nor her own name, nor the name of any other thing. And for many days she could neither hear, nor see, nor stir by her own will. Turned her into a zombie. Then Glaurung, although zombies can be made to work as slaves, can't they? It's done right. Then Glaurung left her standing alone upon Amon Ethir and went back to Nargothrond. Now Mablung, who greatly daring had explored the hills of Felagund when Glaurung left them, fled from them at the approach of the dragon, and returned to Amon Ethir. The sun sank and night fell as he climbed the hill, and he found none there save Nianor, standing alone under the stars as an image of stone. No word she spoke or heard but would follow if he took up her hand. Therefore, in great grief, he led her away, though it seemed to him vain, for they were both like to perish, succourless in the wild. But they were found by 3 of Mablung's companions, and slowly they journeyed northward and eastward towards the fences of the land of Doriath beyond Sirion, and the guarded bridge nigh to the inflowing of Escaldun. Slowly the strength of Nianor returned as they drew nearer to Doriath, but still she could not speak or hear, and walked blindly as she was led. But even as they drew near the fences at last, she closed her staring eyes and would sleep. And they laid her down and rested also, unheedfully, for they were utterly outworn. There they were assailed by an orc band, such as now roamed often as nigh the fences of Doriath as they dared. But Nienor in that hour recovered hearing and sight, and being awakened by the cries of the orcs, she sprang up in terror and fled ere they could come to her. Then the orcs gave chase, and the elves after, and they overtook the orcs and slew them ere they could harm her. But Nienor escaped them, for she fled as in a madness of fear, swifter than a deer, and tore off all her clothing as she ran until she was naked. And she passed out of their sight, running northward, and though they sought her long, they found her not, nor any trace of her. And at last Mablung in despair returned to Menegroth and told the tidings. Then Thingol and Melian were filled with grief, but Mablung went forth and sought long in vain for tidings of Morwen and Nienor. But Nienor ran on into the woods until she was spent, and then fell and slept and awoke. And it was a sunlit morning, and she rejoiced in light as it were a new thing, and all things else that she saw seemed new and strange, for she had no names for them. Nothing did she remember save a darkness that lay behind her and a shadow of fear. Therefore she went warily as a hunted beast, and became famished, for she had no food, and knew not how to seek it. But coming at last to the crossings of Teiglin, she passed over, seeking the shelter of the great trees of Brithiel, for she was afraid, and it seemed to her that the darkness was overtaking her again from which she had fled. But it was a great storm of thunder that came up from the south, and in terror she cast herself down upon the mound of Howth-in Aleph, stopping her ears from the thunder, but the rain smote her and drenched her, and she lay like a wild beast that is dying. There Turambar found her as he came to the crossings of Teiglin, having heard rumour of orcs that roamed near, and seeing in a flare of lightning the body, as it seemed, of the slain maiden lying upon the mound of Vendulas, he was stricken to the heart. But the woodmen lifted her up, and Turambar cast his cloak about her, and they took her to a lodge near by, and warmed her and gave her food. And as soon as she looked upon Turambar, she was comforted, for it seemed to her that she had found at last something that she had sought in her darkness, and she would not be parted from him. But when he asked her concerning her name and her kin and her misadventure, then she became troubled as a child that perceives that nothing is demanded, but cannot understand what it may be. And she wept. Therefore Turambar said, "Do not be troubled. The tail shall wait, and I will give you a name, and I will call you Niniel, Tear Maiden. And at that name she shook her head, but said, Niniel. That was the first word she spoke after her darkness, and it remained her name among the woodmen ever after. On the next day they bore her towards Ephiel Brandir, but when they came to Dimrost, the rainy stair where the tumbling stream of Celebros fell towards Teiglin, a great shuddering came upon her, wherefore afterwards that place was called Nien Gerith, the shuddering water. Ere she came to the home of the woodman upon Amon Obel, she was sick of a fever, and long she lay thus, tended by the women of Prithiel, and they taught her language as to an infant. But ere the autumn came by the skill of Brandir, she was healed of her sickness, and she could speak. But nothing did she remember of the time before she was found by Turambar in the mound of Halthen Eleth. And Brandir loved her, but all her heart was given to Turambar. In that time the woodmen were not troubled by the orcs, and Turambar went not to war, and there was peace in Prithiel. His heart turned to Niniel, and he asked her in marriage, but for that time she delayed in spite of her love. For Brandir foreboded he knew not what, and sought to restrain her, rather for her sake than his own, or rivalry with Turambar, and he revealed to her that Turambar was Turin, son of Hurin, and though she knew not the name, a shadow fell upon her mind. But when 3 years were past since the sack of Nargothrond, Turambar asked Niniel again, and vowed that now he would wed her, or else go back to the war in the wild. And Niniel took him with joy, and they were wedded at the midsummer, and the woodmen of Prithiel made a great feast. But ere the end of the year, Glaurung sent orcs of his dominion against Prithiel, and Turambar sat at home deedless, for he had promised to Niniel that he would go to battle only if their homes were assailed. But the woodmen were worsted, and Dorlas upbraided him that he would not aid the people that he had taken for his own. Then Turambar arose and brought forth again his black sword, and he gathered a great company of the men of Prithiel, and they defeated the orcs utterly. But Glaurung heard tidings that the black sword was in Prithiel, and he pondered what he heard, devising new evil. In the spring of the year after, Niniel conceived, and she became wan and sad, and at the same time there came to Ephyl Brandere the first rumours that Glaurung had issued from Nargothrond. Then Turambar sent out scouts far afield, for now he ordered things as he would, and few gave heed to Brandere. As it drew near to summer, Glaurung came to the broad borders of Brithiel, and lay near the west shores of Tyglen. And then there was great fear among the wood folk, for it was now plain that the great worm would assail them and ravage their land, and not pass by, returning to Angband, as they had hoped. They sought, therefore, the counsel of Turambar, and he counselled them that it was vain to go against Glaurung with all their force, for only by cunning and good fortune could they defeat him. He offered therefore himself to seek the dragon on the borders of the land, and bade the rest of the people to remain at Ephyl Brandere, but to prepare for flight. For if Glaurung had the victory, he would come first to the woodmen's homes to destroy them, and they could not hope to withstand him. But if they then get scattered far and wide, then many might escape, for Glaurung would not take up his dwelling in Brithiel, and would return soon to Nargothrond. Then Turambar asked for companions willing to aid him in his peril, and Dorla stood forth, but no others. Therefore, Dorlas upbraided the people, and spoke scorn of Brandere, who could not play the part of the heir of the house of Haleth. And Brandere was shamed before his people, and was bitter at heart. But Hanthor, kinsman of Brandere, asked his leave to go in his stead. Then Turambar said farewell to Niniel, and she was filled with fear and foreboding, and their parting was sorrowful. But Turambar set out with his two companions, and went to Nen Girith. Then Niniel, being unable to endure her fear and unwilling to wait at the Ephyl tidings of Turambar's fortune, set forth after him, and a great company went with her. At this Brandere was filled all the more with dread, and he sought to dissuade her and the people that would go with her from this rashness, but they heeded him not. Therefore he renounced his lordship and all love for the people that had scorned him, and having naught left but his love for Niniel, he girt himself with a sword and went after her, but being lame, he fell far behind. Now Turambar came to Nen Girith at sundown, and there he learned that Glaurung lay on the brink of the high shores of Tyglen, and was like to move when night fell. Then he called those tidings good, for the dragon lay at Kabed en Aras, where the river ran in a deep and narrow gorge, that a hunted deer might overleap, and Turambar thought that he would seek no further, but would attempt to pass over the gorge. Therefore, he purposed to creep down at dusk and descend into the ravine under night and cross over the wild water, and then to climb up the further cliff and so come to the dragon beneath his guard. This counsel he took, but the heart of Dorlas failed when they came to the races of Teiglin in the dark, and he dared not attempt the perilous crossing, but drew back and lurked in the woods, burdened with shame. Turambar and Hunthor nonetheless crossed over in safety, for the loud roaring of the water drowned all other sounds, and Glaurung slept. But ere the middle night the dragon aroused, and with a great noise and blast cast his forward part across the chasm, and began to draw his bulk after. Turambar and Hunthor were well nigh overcome by the heat and the stench, as they sought in haste for a way up to come at Glaurung, and Hunthor was slain by a great stone that was dislodged from on high by the passage of the dragon, and smote him on the head and cast him into the river. So he ended of the house of Haleth, not the least valiant. Then Turambar summoned all his will and courage, and climbed the cliff alone, and came beneath the dragon. Then he drew Gorthang, and with all the might of his arm and of his hate, he thrust it into the soft belly of the worm, even up to the hilts. But then when Glaurung felt his death pang, he screamed, and in his dreadful throe he heaved up his bulk and hurled himself across the chasm, and there lay lashing and coiling in his agony. And he set all in a blaze about him, and bet all to ruin, until at last his fires died, and he lay still. Now Gorthang had been wrested from Turambar's hand in the throw of Glaurung, and it clave to the belly of the dragon. Turambar therefore crossed the water once more, desiring to recover his sword, and to look upon his foe. And he found him stretched at his length, and rolled upon one side, and the hilts of Gorthang stood in his belly. Then Turambar seized the hilts and set his foot upon the belly, and cried in mockery of the dragon and his words at Nargothrond, "Hail, worm of Morgoth, well met again! Die now, and the darkness have thee. Thus is Turin, son of Hurin, avenged." Oh, I felt that. Dear goddess. Then he wrenched out the sword, but a spout of black blood followed it, and it fell on his hand, and the venom burned it. And thereupon Glaurung opened his eyes and looked upon Turambar with such malice that it smote him as a blow. By that stroke and the anguish of the venom, he fell into a dark swoon, and lay as one dead, and his sword was beneath him. The screams of Glaurung rang in the woods, and came to the people that waited at Nen Garith, and when those that looked forth heard them, and saw afar the ruin and burning that the dragon made, they deemed that he had triumphed, and was destroying those that assailed him. And Niniel sat and shuddered beside the falling water. And at the voice of Glaurung, her darkness crept upon her again, so that she could not stir from that place of her own will. Even so Brandir found her, for he came to Nen Garith at last, limping wearily, and when he heard that the dragon had crossed the river and had beaten down his foes, his heart yearned towards Niniel in pity. We've only 4 minutes left and 2.5 pages to go, so there'll be part 2, a very short video, which is annoying, people of Earth, but there's nothing I can do. And his heart yearned towards Niniel in pity, yet he thought also, Turambar is dead, but Niniel lives. Now it may be that she will come with me, and I will lead her away, and so we shall escape from the dragon together. After a while, therefore, he stood by Niniel, and he said, Come, 'tis time to go. If you will, I will lead you. And he took her hand, and she arose silently and followed him. And in the darkness none saw them go. But as they went down the path to the crossings, the moon rose and cast a grey light on the land. And Niniel said, Is this the way? And Brandir answered that he knew no way, save to flee as they might from Glaurung and escape into the wild. But Niniel said, The black sword was my beloved and my husband. To seek him only do I go. What else could you think? And she sped on before him. Thus she came towards the crossings of Teiglin, and beheld Halthen Eleth in the white moonlight, and great dread came on her. Then with a cry she turned away, casting off her cloak, and fled southward along the river, and her white raiment shone in the moon. Thus Brandir saw her from the hillside, and turned to cross her path, but he was still behind her when she came to the ruin of Glaurung, nigh the brink of Kabed en Arras. There she saw the dragon lying, but she heeded him not, for a man lay beside him, and she ran to Turon Bar and called his name in vain. Then finding that his hand was burned, she washed it with tears and bound it about with a strip of her raiment.